Hello, lovely beans. I have an incredibly special guest with me today. This is one of those interviews that not only I've been waiting for, but I think a lot of you have as well. I have my mom.
Hello, lovely beans.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So, couple things that I want to cover before this interview starts. My mom and I have a very unique and very, very special relationship. We very much, I am the older sister, she is the younger sister. That is actually because in my one of my past lives, I was actually her older sister. My grandma actually had a child before my mom was born, and that was me. I came through, was around for about 6 months, and then I
No,
passed
one
on.
month.
Okay, so I was around for a month.
For a month.
Well, I was in the womb for 9, I guess.
Oh,
So
that's true. Yes.
I was there for a minute.
Forgot that one.
Exactly. Um, but yeah, so I had come through before through my grandmother and passed away. And then about a year later, my mom was born. And even when I was born, she was like my younger sister. And so I do tease her, I do razz her, just know it's out of love. There's no disrespect there whatsoever. But my mom is one of my best friends on the planet. She's one of the most amazing people I've ever met. She is,
I'm blushing. Can you feel it?
as you should be. But she also, besides being spiritual, she also is an astrologer. So, yes, I am an astrologer's daughter. Trigger warning, there is going to be some talk eventually in this about birth and the birthing process, just about what she went through in order to have me. So, let's get into it. So, Ma,
Yes.
so when you were about age 5, right? You
Yes.
started collecting something very abnormal for a 5-year-old.
I had this incredible thirst for knowledge about UFOs, flying saucers, and anything about the stars. And I even found it. I have a book that I was 5 and 6 years old, and I had a scrapbook of all the articles that were out at that time. Of course, Roswell had been in what 47 or 8 or 9.
47.
Yeah, and so there was a lot of things in the newspaper about UFOs, and I collected everything I could find on it.
Uh, Again, very abnormal for a 5-year-old, but I love it. On top of that, obviously, Grandma was extremely spiritually open and spiritual, as well as Grandpa, both of
Yes,
your parents.
yes,
And with that, you were definitely raised in a house that allowed and fostered that.
yes.
And so, we're going to fast forward a little bit and talk about when you left home and was a big girl in the city all by
Oh
yourself.
boy.
And I guess the best way to describe it is you were spiritually hungry during that time. You were out of college, you're definitely on your own, you had a great job working in the city, and this is during, the roaring 60s when there was a ton of different stuff out there. If you guys haven't heard, she was actually on one of the Uncomfortable podcasts for a little quick clip in which she talked about her and a friend actually saw a little flyer for organ music at the Satanic Church. And my mom and her friend went and laughed hysterically at Anton LaVey. So obviously you were spiritually hungry. Satanism
Well,
wasn't for you.
no. I had been raised in the Methodist Church all my life, and when I got to be in high school, we stopped going to the regular churches, and my mom was very metaphysical. Actually, my dad very much so. So I was trained in that, but we always were looking for something outside of the organized religion. And I was studying astrology in college. So when I got to the city, there was a metaphysical center up there that I was there 2 or 3 nights a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for all the lectures and the different books and things. So I was always looking for that. I joined the Edgar Casey Foundation, in which that's the one where I started to really open up and started seeing things.
Beautiful.
But I was very much into God, Christ, and knowing that there's more out there than what we see right here.
And more than what organized religion was talking about,
Definitely.
especially at the time. So, a period of time occurs in which, maybe about 8 years, you're all over the city, you're going into all these different metaphysic workshops and retreats and things like that. And you find out that you and Grandma are going to meet this spiritual teacher. And Grandma has this incredible dream a couple nights before.
Yes, we were in a metaphysical group, and the teacher was a young man who actually was an ET. And
Well, that's definitely quite the statement.
Yes,
So we'll just say, not from here.
exactly. And he had much higher knowledge of the
Yes.
world and the universe. And so we were to meet him at his parents' house, and we knew the mother, who was actually one of the teachers. And so prior to that, my mom had a dream, and she said that she walked outside and she saw these boots, and they were like work boots that she had never seen before. And in the boots, then she saw this long flowing gown that was like glistening. And she looked up, and it went so far up she couldn't even see the face of the person. But
Meaning
was,
the being was
yes,
so tall.
it was a very high being, and she just couldn't figure that out. Like, that didn't make sense. So we go to this person's house, and we start walking up the pathway, and all of a sudden my mom screeches, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, look at this!" And I looked over, and there were a pair of boots out in front, of the front door. And she said, "Those are exactly the same boots that I saw in my dream." So we go in and we meet who would become my spiritual teacher. And we were talking, and he was looking away, and then he looked over at me, and his eyes went crystalline.
Well, let's back up there, because
Okay.
I feel like we're missing a very important part. You met this person, and you're in a small room
Mm-hmm.
in a home,
Yes.
and the person basically asked, "Why did you want to meet me? Like, what do you want to do?" And you countered with, "I want to work with you."
Oh, yes.
And they were looking away, and then they turned back, and you said their eyes went.
Yeah. I said, "I want to work with you." It turns out he did have a wonderful nonprofit corporation at the time. And there was a lot that I ended up working with him on. But I didn't know that at the time. And he said, "Well, why are you here?" And I said, "Well, I want to grow spiritually, and I don't know why, but I want to work with you." And he kind of chuckled and looked away, and when he looked back at me, his eyes turned crystal, both eyes.
Now describe, what does that look
As
like?
if you were looking at a diamond that the sun was on it, and it was crystallizing. It was actually glowing. And of course I sat back like, "Oh my gosh."
And there was no direct light in that room,
No,
correct?
no.
Yeah, so there was no physical
No.
reason why that would happen.
But that night, when I went to sleep, I closed my eyes, and his face appeared right in front of me with those crystalline eyes. So in my mind, I had found my teacher.
Oh, well, that's really beautiful.
It was.
Um, and this is going to be a bit of a jump for people, but it'll probably explain some things. um, I don't normally share a whole lot about me or my background, but today's the day. It's Mother's Day.
Exactly.
That's why I got my mama on
Tell
here.
all.
Exactly. Do tell. So, you began working with him,
Yes.
and you were in the metaphysical groups. You were working with him directly. You had some extreme spiritual growth.
Oh, yes.
He was actually the one who ended up finding the pamphlet from the Satanic Church and
Yes.
helping you burn it.
And we went to the Golden Gate Bridge at the point where you could still walk just a little bit on there as a visitor, and he put it on fire and threw it into the ocean, and he said, well, get rid of that.
And that stopped your visitations by the dark one that the Satanic Church
Oh, yes.
worships.
Yeah.
So, fast forward a couple years. This is a little awkward to talk about, but you knew when you had met him that there were some feelings there that weren't just teacher. And you blocked them, obviously. That's your
Yes.
spiritual teacher. You thought maybe it was just encountering someone like this, that unconditional love. Sometimes that can be misinterpreted. But it turns out those feelings were reciprocated.
Yes.
And you two decided to become a little bit more.
Yes.
Living in sin. No.
Share marital bliss.
So you ended up getting married.
Yes, he had told his mother. He had told his mother 10 years prior that he would meet his twin Ray and marry her on a specific date. And that's exactly the date that we ended up getting married on.
And just for the record, because there is a lot of talk about twin flames, twin
Right.
rays, this is before that term was very widely used.
Right.
And also, twin rays, unfortunately, don't always last forever and ever.
No, they're very, there's a lot of the new age coming out with, the twin ray and the twin flame. They're not that prevalent on Earth.
No.
But when they are, there is a specific mission that they're to do.
Correct. And part of that mission ended up becoming me.
Yes.
Not to toot my own horn or anything, but thanks.
You were definitely a child of light.
Well, it's kind of interesting, and trigger warning, if you don't want to hear about birth, you might want to fast forward a couple minutes, but we're definitely going to go into it because it's a part of my origin story. So, you were super sick with the flu.
Yes.
Very sick with the flu,
Yes.
actually. And basically, both of you were sick. You were both on different couches, just doing what you do when you have the flu, being miserable and laying down. And he basically looked at you and said, do you want to have a baby? And you said, obviously, well, yeah, like we've been working towards having a child, but right now we have the flu. And he said, the time is now.
He said, if you want the baby. And I said, yes. And he said, tonight's the night. And it turned out it was.
Yeah, we're blasé over some of that. So you end up pregnant.
Yes.
And you guys had been trying for a while, and you end up pregnant from that night.
Yep.
And how many months were you pregnant when you had that dream when I came to you?
7 to 8 months. It was probably a good month and a half before you were actually born.
Okay, well, go ahead, share.
It was in the early morning. I was actually awake. But you know how you kind of lay there and you think, oh, just a few minutes more. And all of a sudden, with my eyes closed, I see this being come towards me. And it's this adorable, just beautiful face with this blonde hair and these big blue eyes. And she was just looking at me from side to side. And she was maybe 6 inches from my eyes, just looking at me. And I was looking at her, and I thought, oh, what a beautiful little being. And of course, when I woke up, I told my husband, and he said, that's our daughter. She came to visit you.
How old was I when I appeared to you?
Uh,
What age did I look at you?
Maybe 8 months or so. You weren't very old, but you were enough that you could hold your head up and look at me.
And make eye contact. So, I mentioned I'm an astrologer's daughter, and that's going to come into play with this a little bit as we discuss the birthing process.
Oh,
Um, so, you had not, a couple things to cover. Number one, you really weren't around children as in your life. You never really babysat.
no, I was an only child, and um, my dad had a business that when during the summer months when everybody else was maybe babysitting, he would bring me in because I could do shorthand, and I did a lot of administrative things. So I worked in that, and I had never, I think I babysat once for someone for a few hours, and that was it.
Yeah, so, and no one prepared you for the birthing process
No,
at all, and almost deliberately so.
yes,
You were very blindsided with how it went.
yes.
Your doctor literally told you, when you asked, "How will I know I'm in labor?" the doctor replied,
He turned around and said, "You'll know." And that was it.
"Delightful."
But sometimes that's a good thing because you don't have any pre thoughts in there. But
Preconceived
you know, for
notions.
for me, it was.
It would have helped. We'll put it that
It
way.
sure as heck would have.
So, my mom was in labor with me for 55 hours.
Hmm.
So, when I'm recording this on Mother's Day, it is with deep appreciation for the 55 hours of labor.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah. Now that it's done and we're
Yes.
far removed from the time.
Let's put it this way. I went through 2 Johnny Carson shows. I went in on a Wednesday, and they said, thinking I was ready to pop, and the nurse said, "You're only 1 centimeter." So she said, "Go home. We'll see you tonight." Well, finally on Friday night, I delivered.
My Lord.
I know.
So, during this process, I was all back labor,
Yes.
which you had been born with a lower back issue
Yeah.
already, which was bad enough. So it was pretty painful. They decided to give you an epidural at one part, thinking you were further along than you were.
Right.
It wore off just as the real hard labor began.
It wore off, and it was bliss to have 2 hours without pain. And it wore off, and I thought, oh, how wonderful. Oh, boy, here it comes. And so another 2 hours of pushing, and finally.
Well, and part of it is to explain. So at first, I'm turned around, and then I went breech.
Yes.
So I was upside down, basically. And you said Dad stared at the monitor because they were getting ready to do a C-section.
Right. They came in and said, "I think we're going to have to do a C-section." And he said, "Why?" And they said that you had wrapped around the cord, and there was a monitor in the room. And he took off his glass. Well, he didn't wear glasses. I think he had his sunglasses on there for some reason. And he looked at the monitor, and I could see something coming out, like an energy. And he looked at that monitor for a good minute, and all of a sudden the doctor says, "Well, son of a gun, she's turned around. We don't have to do a C-section."
Yeah, so at first I was breech, then I flipped on
Yes.
my own. Did a little cartwheel for you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And then I got the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck, and then I somehow undid that. And then I finally decided to come on out, and you, in true astrologer fashion, made sure that as I'm crowning, get a picture with the clock
Yeah.
for the exact date and time.
Yeah, I know. It's fabulous. And her dad had a watch, and the minute they brought her out, the watch starts playing like the Star Spangled Banner, and he goes, "Well, she's right on time."
And the interesting thing about that is I was not born at a normal time. I wasn't
No.
born at like a 15 or a 30 or a 45 or even on the hour. It was a very abnormal time for that to come out. But the reason I bring up being an astrologer's daughter and all of this is because there are times and you had actually done the astrology. If I had been born
Yes.
15 minutes before or a day or two before, if they had done that C-section the day before, I would have been completely different.
Well, you arrived, I think, 5 hours after the time that I put in beforehand, and it would have totally changed your chart. All the planets had, if you know astrology, they move at different rates, but this particular aspect, you would have been a very different person.
Not who I am today.
Right.
With my stellium in the 6th house. I tell people I came here to work.
You did.
So, you have this child now, and we've always had a bond.
Yes.
You were not trained in maternal things.
No.
You picked a lot up on the fly. And by
Literally.
that, yeah. And with that, I think the fun part is that I tell people is my mom never really talked baby talk to me.
No.
She talked to me like I was an adult when I was an infant.
Well, not that much, but
we had pretty logical conversations. And even as a kid, from the 3 to, whatever 8 range, I was always talked to like an adult. We had very grown-up conversations. And obviously, like we've always talked about, if I didn't come out with gifts, you would have known I was adopted or
yes.
no, changeling
Exactly.
or something.
I knew that you would have certain metaphysical gifts.
Yeah, because not only on your lineage, but also on the other side. So we always had an extremely tight bond. Like, even to this day, we always know when the other one's going to call or if something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
We know. And part of that is a, maternal bond. With us, it's just a little bit deeper.
Oh, gosh, yes.
And part of that bond, and as I said, my mother spoke to me like an adult even when I was a child. So I knew things were going on. And there is a specific time in our lives where something was going to shift pretty dramatically. And Dad wasn't home. He was actually out of the state at the time and not due back for a few days. And we had a family friend come over, and they were sleeping on the couch, and I slept in with you that night. And this ties into the whole twin ray thing a little bit, but
Yeah.
basically in the middle of the night, you and I woke up because we heard Dad come home. And in order to get in the door, there were like 3 different locks, and all of them were
Right.
extremely noisy, and one had a chain and it would bang all around. And we were also thinking about the person who was sleeping out on the couch and, waking them up. And so you and I get up and we poke our heads out the hallway, and we see not only is Dad home, but Grandma, your mom,
Mm-hmm.
is with him.
She was supposed to come up like at 8 in the morning. She was going to leave to come up and be with me for the day. And yet this was 4 in the morning. And I thought, oh, she probably I didn't know why she was there early, but she was out in the living room talking with your dad.
And you and I are fully awake.
Totally. I had not gone to sleep yet. I had been up, and I had showered, and then I came back to bed, and I said something, oh, you're home, and he said yes, and then he went out into the living room, and you jumped up and said, Daddy, Daddy, I want to see Daddy, and I said, well, wait, he's talking with Grandma. Give him some time.
So you held me back in the room,
Yes.
but both of our heads were looking out of the room down the hall
Right.
into where they were talking, and we could see and hear them.
Right,
And mind you, our friend who was sleeping on the couch,
right.
they're standing right in front of her.
Yes.
And we're wondering, how is she sleeping through this?
Yeah.
And probably that she's sleeping through it just to be respectful and
Right.
not intrude.
Could be.
And we hear them have a conversation in which he tells your mom that you two are going to get a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And she shrieks, and you hear the news. Obviously, that's not easy. I hear the news. I'm confused. And then you basically back me into the room and tell me we're going to let them talk as you're processing all of this.
Right.
Now, mind you, I'm young. I'm 6 or 7 at the time. I'm old enough to know what's going on, but still young enough that I'm not unbridled. Um, and we go back into the room for a little bit, and then we hear the door open,
Hmm.
and
And I look out and I can see them walking. There was our front door had a huge glass
bay
frame,
window.
yes. And so I could see them walking out, and I thought, oh, maybe they're going to go have coffee or something.
Or a cigarette or something.
So I got you back in bed, and I got some milk or whatever I had, and I went out to the living room, and our friend was still asleep, and I looked, and the doors were still latched.
From the inside.
Yes, which meant no one,
Could have gotten it.
no, in or out. And so I unlatched them, and I went out on the front porch, and then I looked around. I went all the way out, and there you'd have to see there would be a place to park, and there were no cars there. So I'm like, what the heck? So when I spoke with him later, he wasn't even in California.
Yeah.
However,
And Grandma was asleep.
right, and she hadn't even left yet. And so he could teleport. I always knew that he could teleport. He had done that when he was a
Meaning
child.
be more than one place at a time.
Yes, you're in one place, but your body will project somewhere else.
Yeah. Sometimes we use different words than other people
Yes.
use. But the reason I bring that experience up, not only because you and I had it together as mother and daughter, and we were seeing something spiritually happen
Right.
together, that could be quantified and verified, but also the friend, when they eventually woke up, had no
Yeah, she said no one was here.
yeah, which physically no one could have been there because
No.
of all the latches and stuff
Exactly.
on the door. But what that did, though, is it gave you a really good heads up as to what was to come.
Right.
Because it was going to be a very ugly part in
Right.
your life. Divorce is, no one gets married.
It's never easy.
No one gets married expecting to be divorced. But it does happen. But having that heads up together, I thought was really special.
A bond.
Well, even further than a bond. I mean, what a gift for us to know that
Yes.
that was coming down the pike.
Yes.
Because the way that it did happen was pretty sudden and out of left field.
Right.
But to be given that warning, and the reason I do bring that up is because there's a lot of talk in the spiritual community about twin rays.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, everyone who's in love thinks they are one with
Yeah,
their partner.
well-
And twin rays typically have a really rough.
Yeah, it's a
Go.
friction thing that when you come here with your twin ray, it's not all peaches and cream. It's a growth, it's a spiritual growth that you have, and with that is a friction here and there and there are many people that don't make it. I mean, we still, even through the divorce, up until his death, we spoke every day on the phone. We were still close friends.
Absolute best friends.
Yeah.
You guys actually talked more than I talked. I used to joke about that.
Yeah.
But I always felt that was awesome because that true friendship was always there. That
Yeah.
true spiritual bond was
Yes.
always there. And you both decided, regardless what was going on in your relationship, you two were still co-parenting
Yes.
me.
Yes.
And that's
And
extremely
when I
important.
went through both the death of each parent, he was the one that was there for me on the phone at the time. So,
Like I said, best friends.
yep.
Well, going into something a little happier. So when I was a kid, obviously, with having some of the gifts that I did, you and Dad both guided me, and one of the biggest things was taught me not to use my gifts improperly.
Right.
And you always say, don't lie and be kind.
Well, yeah. When I say don't lie, don't fabricate that you've seen something or oh this just happened or whatever when it didn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Don't deceive the other person. If it happened, speak it, but don't, if in other words you're trying to impress someone, don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the truth or nothing but the truth. And always to be humble. So you have these gifts, use them, God gave them to you, but always be humble about it.
Yeah, 100% agree.
And take the high road at all times.
Yeah. And the reason I bring this up is I know there's a lot of you out there who, whether it be yourself or soon to come, that you will have children and your children will have gifts. And some of you are just having these awakenings yourself and not necessarily knowing what to all of a sudden do with the child who comes out the gate
Right.
with some of these gifts. And there was something in specific we were talking about earlier. Not one of my proudest moments, but I was 6, so we'll give it to me, okay?
Yes.
So there was a little boy at school, and he was being very, very mean to me. Very mean. And making fun of me and just being mean. And I, instead of a normal child of like, I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever you say bounces off me and sticks back to you, I instead turned around and basically my retort was, you're the reason your parents are getting divorced.
Oh, gosh.
Like I said, not my proudest moment, but I was 6 years old. And, obviously, little whatever his name was started sobbing, and I got hauled into the office or whatever for being mean. Turns out, yes, his parents were divorcing, but no one knew. He knew that they were fighting. And so, obviously I got a good talking to because the teachers just thought that maybe you, meaning my parents, knew his parents and I was being mean. No, you guys didn't know the parents at all. I just psychically knew that his parents were getting divorced and he was a bone of contention. So that was a real big teaching moment for me.
Yeah.
You were firm but kind with it and explained to me why. And the reason why is you don't improperly use your gifts.
Correct.
As mad as I was in that moment that I was being made fun of, and just because I have inside information doesn't mean I should use it
Right.
in that situation. And that's always really stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been one of those things where when I am trying to, help others or teach others, I do try to talk about firm boundaries. Don't look where you're not asked to.
Right.
Just because you can doesn't mean you do it, right? Especially when it comes to being psychic or remote viewing or asking for information. Just because you have the ability to doesn't mean that you intrude on someone else's
Right.
privacy. And there are bigger universal laws and rules to that as well. But, don't be mean. And you are this incredible being.
Oh, my dear.
Okay, well, that's fine. You can be humble all you want, but I'm your daughter and I get to tell the world how brilliant you are because you are.
Well, thank you.
You are the absolute epitome of what a Christ-like person should be.
Oh, my dear.
Okay, well, I mean it. It's true.
Well, thank you.
God, I'm always crying on these things.
I'm
You, even through the divorce,
Yeah.
when you could have been a total B word,
Yeah.
you never were. You treated him with love and compassion. You never spoke ill. You guys co-parented. You did your best to make sure that I was informed as to what was going on.
And he was always invited.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you were never mean.
No.
You never ousted. And you've been like that with multiple people over my life. Obviously, I was one of those kids who ended up with, if there was a strange person around, I ended up with them. So, what do I have? Uranus in the
I was
seventh?
going to say, no, yeah, you're honest in the 7th house. Strange.
Strange people. So, I can remember this story. I was early teens. And we had a long parking lot in this apartment building, and it went out to kind of 2 or 3 major streets. And I had friends who lived across the streets. So we would, basically, one of us would go hang out at the bus stop waiting for the other ones to get done with dinner and come down. And this night, apparently, none of my friends came down, but I made some really fun friends at the bus stop.
Oh, my gosh.
And so I start traipsing through the parking lot, and I have a woman who cleans houses. I have a American veteran in a wheelchair with the American flag hanging off the bat, and a homeless man with his shopping cart. And I'm traipsing through the parking lot with them asking if we can feed my new friends dinner.
Oh, no.
And you said, "I'm sorry, no." And then I wasn't allowed to go to the bus stop by
Right.
myself anymore. But,
I mean, I'm charitable, but.
yeah. And I mean, let's face it, in my teen years, and definitely there were some people around that, as a parent, I'm sure you wish I would have been around some
Well,
different people.
I have a different view on it now that you're older, and the epitome of the great citizen and a good person and highly productive is that sometimes those people are put in your life for you to help, even if it was for a moment of the person at the bus stop had someone that was nice enough to wheel him down the into the parking lot. I don't know what I'm trying to say, that sometimes these quote undesirable people that you wouldn't normally choose are put into your life for a lot of different reasons. We don't know what they are.
Yeah.
I think, that's where discernment comes in, of being able to decipher whether this is a good or bad situation.
Or influence, yeah.
Yes.
And for the most part, I was a pretty good kid. I'm laughing.
You were.
To you, I was. Absolutely. I mean, I was very independent. I was a very strong-willed child.
Yes.
And that went forth. I have looked the same pretty much since I was 13, and that can get you in a lot of trouble when you're a young girl, because I could get into places without being carded and things like that. So,
Tell all.
we're not going there. Not on Mother's Day. But that being said, I also was able to interact with adults because of the way you spoke to me when I was little. I was never afraid of adults.
Yeah.
And therefore, at a young age, I mean, I can remember babysitting for people when I was like 8 and 9, and people had no clue I was that
Yeah.
young. They thought I
No,
was.
you could blend in. I had the same thing with my parents, in that I was not afraid because I was exposed to adults all the time, and
Yeah.
so you didn't fear them.
I didn't, and I could blend in pretty well. I know I've joked about it on before, but strangers are just friends I haven't met yet.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
and that's pretty much how I treated the world. I also, had to learn in my late teens and 20s to scale that back, because
Yeah.
I would go to the grocery store and it would be a 3-hour trip instead of 20 minutes because everyone would tell me their life stories.
Exactly.
But still good, because at the end of the day, if I was able to do some good in the world, those people need to talk, whatever it was. That was just shining light. And I know you and I, whenever we go into grocery stores, everyone's waving and laughing.
I was just thinking the gift of laughter.
Yes.
And laughter, as you know, not only really helps the person that's laughing, because that can unleash a lot of darkness in you. Laughter is a great way to ward off the dark spirits. But think of the good it does for others, the recipients of it. And I know when we go in a grocery store, I don't think there's been one time when we check out that the people are, as we're walking up, bye, waving to us and
like
laughing,
half the store.
and laughing because we laugh so much.
Well, and being on a plane with you was an absolute hoot.
God.
I mean, the pilot actually, because of the stewardesses were joking with us, the pilot at the end actually came back
Yes.
and gave you his pin of wings and said, "You've just joined the Mile High Club." And the plane went hysterically
And
laughing.
I said, "What's that?"
Yeah.
And then he gave me a free movie.
Oh, that's right. Yes. So overall, we have a good time, but I also feel that that's our random little way
Yes.
of spreading light.
Definitely.
Of just talking to people, and again, just showing. I think the biggest thing you've always said to me is, if you just listen, people will talk.
Yes.
And most people really want to talk. They just don't have anyone who wants to listen.
Yeah.
And I find that one of the saddest things in society.
People tell me things that they wouldn't tell anyone else, and it's amazing. It's been this way all my life. And others will say, "Well, how did why did they tell you that?" And all I say is because I asked and I listened.
And you don't ask like the Inquisition.
No. Well,
I'm laughing because she has sometimes, but
I was a news reporter.
that's true at one point. I think it's important though because that is a huge thing. Communication is huge,
Yes.
right? Not only in romantic relationships, within friendships, within the world in general. And if all you're doing is talking with people who believe the same as you do,
Right.
you learn nothing.
Yeah.
You stay in your little bubble and you're isolated. But when you are open enough to go out there and talk to people who, from all different belief systems and ways of life, and hear them out,
Right.
there's something Dad used to say, shut up and listen and you might learn something.
Exactly.
And one other thing that you taught was being a cheerleader for everyone. Not only were you a cheerleader
Yes.
back in the day, you adorable little thing you, but
Me and my pom-poms
oh my
too.
God, you're so cute. Being other people's cheerleaders.
Yeah.
I was not raised with jealousy, and I was not raised with guilt. And I know a lot of you out there are probably thinking, what is that like? It's amazing. First of all, I met a lot of people who were raised with a ton of guilt, lots of jealousy, whether it's within the family,
Yeah.
and then that goes out from there. But neither of those things were anywhere in my life. And to be honest, I really don't understand jealousy or guilt. I know I've talked about jealousy a little bit. Guilt, I always feel I'm in control of my actions. I'm in control of me. If I've done something that I feel bad about later, apologize for it, learn from it, and move on. But I don't need to sit there and waddle in guilt
Right.
about it, because guilt will just eat you and consume you.
Well, jealousy does too.
And jealousy does too. And the thing about jealousy, and this is the reason I bring up the cheerleader thing for you. Jealousy is envy or wanting something that someone else has and being envious of them, instead of getting off your duff and saying, wow, I want to be like that too.
Yes.
So what steps can I go through in order to make that happen? Or being a cheerleader, which I definitely am, thanks to a lot of your training, is
No, but you are.
being happy for other
Exactly.
people. It doesn't matter if I'm involved or affected at all. Most of the time, I'm happier when I'm not affected at all. When people are out there doing good, when they're leveling up, when they're making strides in their life, if they've got something great happening for them, I'm excited.
Exactly.
Why wouldn't I be? And even if I don't know you, I'm still excited for
Exactly,
you.
yes.
You see people, whether it's on the news, like, some hero saves, a baby or whatever it is. Like, how awesome that that person is getting recognition and that they deserve. Or how awesome is it that someone I know did a creation or a passion project and people are really taking to it, or that they're getting signed, or whatever it is that people are getting. I think that's amazing. I want to celebrate with you.
Exactly.
Even if I'm not in your orbit.
It's a very nice gift to have.
And honestly, I think at the end of the day, it's also gratitude. Just being so grateful that I get to witness
Yes.
them do that, whether it's direct or indirect. Whether it's somebody on the news getting an award, or they won the lottery or something. Like, how wonderful for them. Like, their lives just changed.
Well, when you look at some people who show jealousy, and even in the movies, they love to hype that up.
Mm-hmm.
It's really not a good look. It's not productive.
It's not.
It's what's the word I want?
Self-limiting.
Destructive. Yes,
Self-destructive and
Yeah.
self-limiting
Yeah.
as well. I mean, listen, if you think someone looks really pretty, instead of putting them down because you don't look like them, why don't you try to do whatever it is for you that makes you feel beautiful?
Right.
Whatever features you have that you can gussy up, do that.
Yeah.
Or,
Or every day, start your day and say, I'm going to tell two or three people something I like about them.
mhm,
And you can walk along the streets. I love that hat, or a coworker, whatever it is, and you'll see they beam happiness.
I have a real life story I'm going to share. So, this is some years ago. I normally like everyone. Um, I know that sounds a little Pollyanna of me, but for the most part, I really do like everyone. There's very few people in this world that I try to stay away from or dislike. Would even say enough that I dislike them to avoid them as much as
Right.
possible.
No, I'm the same way.
So there's years ago, I'm at this job, and this man comes in, and it was within the first couple minutes, I was like, uh oh. And I felt this dislike. And it was vast. It was very unexpected for me because, like I said, I normally like everyone. But he was just bragging about this and
Oh.
that and this and that. And it was like, it got to the point where I'm thinking in my head, this is gross. Like, you're just being a gross person. Not like inappropriate gross, but just like ew. You're the way
Yeah.
you're talking, the way you're making yourself sound is just ew for me. And so in this conversation, obviously I'm at work, so I got to be nice, right? And I start praying in the middle of it because I start recognizing this is way abnormal for me. I'm not able to find one thing about this guy that I like.
Yeah.
And so I start praying and I said, God, please, 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 all people are your creatures. Please show me one thing about this guy that is truly him that I can like, because this is way beyond the scope of anything I've experienced of disliking someone so wholeheartedly. And I finished the prayer, and I guess I asked a question about kids or something, and his whole demeanor changed, and he said, "Oh, I have two wonderful children, and I have the best wife in the world." And he completely changed. This
Yes.
braggadocious man who was just putting off all these gross vibes to me completely showed me who he really was.
Yes.
And he pulls out his phone, his eyes well up, he's showing me his kids, he's showing me his wife and the wedding photos. And I thought, that's what I was reacting to.
Right.
That fake braggadociousness.
Yes.
All I was seeing was this fake ego, this fake, and that's what I was reacting to. And when he showed me the true person he was, his love for his wife and kids,
Mm-hmm.
that was a prayer instantly answered. But I know that's a very random story for what we're talking
you
about.
tried to transfigure. You helped transfigure something that was very negative about him into a positive.
Well, and I also just energetically, I didn't
Yes.
want to have that feeling that I had about him. I mean, I couldn't even figure it out. But now I understand that there's a certain type of false bravado that
Yes.
I just have an innate reaction to because it's false, it's fake.
And normally, as we all know, when people do that, when they either put someone else down or bragging, they don't feel so good about themselves.
That's true. That's
Yes.
true. You always look a little deeper into the
Yeah.
psychology of
I've
what's
always,
driving the action and the
Yes.
behavior.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because besides just being spiritual beings having a human experience, part of this human experience is all these humany things.
Exactly.
And humany things meaning emotions and things we have to physically do and interactions.
When you can try and figure out someone else and give them the benefit of the doubt, and like you say, try to transfigure it with something.
Positive.
You had an actual wonderful feeling. When you unselfishly asked God to show you something about this man that was good, that's a form of spiritual of using your gift.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I didn't even think of it in that aspect. I think it was more for me just I didn't want to have that bad energy and that bad vibe and juju towards this person. I
No,
couldn't figure out why I was having it.
but you allowed him to speak,
Yeah.
and
Well, and even praying, God, can you please show me? I know this person isn't like this. So, obviously, I am not who I am just because I exist. It was all this great fostering and training by someone as beautiful as you.
oh, thank you,
I'm getting all
dear.
choked up again, but
Well, I had parents that were wonderful and took a lot of time with me and uh, talked a lot this way too. So, I mean, it kind of, we're giving to each generation.
it's true. And it was something actually the whole reason I decided to, make these YouTubes is one of my aunts had said something to me some years back. And she said, "Oh, are you going to have kids?" And I said, "Well, I would like to, but I don't know if that's in God's plan for me." And she looked at me, and it was one of those moments where, like, her whole demeanor changed from being very lighthearted, and she got very serious. And she said, "Well, you're the last of your line. What are you going to do with all the knowledge that you have if you don't have children?" And it stuck with me. And it really, really did, because I thought, I am the end of a great two bloodlines. Well,
Mm-hmm.
four if you even go back, and more than that if you go back further.
Think of the people you're reaching
Well, and
with your
that's
work.
and this is why I wanted to put this out there. This is
Mm-hmm.
my little contribution to the world. This is my rock in the pond.
It's a big contribution.
I try. But it is what Spirit wants it to be. I want to talk really quick because I'm getting all choked up again.
Oh.
I have to keep bringing it back to something funny. But you were there the night of the exorcism that
Oh, yes.
my cousin, your nephew,
Oh
was a
my
part of.
gosh, yes.
A tea party that went mad. Um, so, real quick, because I have to end on a high note. I know people are thinking, "Oh, you're talking about an exorcism, real high note." Just work with me, people.
Yeah,
So,
there's something behind this.
so as this exorcism is happening, and I have the afflicted person, literally, it's the thing inside of it was coming through full force. I've got my poor cousin terrified to the point where he can barely move. And I look over at my mom, and she's sitting there with her hands and feet up, smiling
In a recliner.
with the biggest smile you could smile. And she looks like she is an absolute enjoyment. And I thought, she's fine. And my cousin told me after, he said it was, he's sitting there terrified, seeing what's happening in front of him take place. And at one point, he got the urge to look at you, and he saw how you were smiling and happy. And he said it took his terror down about 52 notches. So that's just another beacon of
Well,
light.
I didn't really grasp the situation. I was listening, but not totally. I was kind of in my own thoughts. And all of a sudden, I heard something, and I saw you doing this motion of pulling this stuff out of this person, and this person not being very nice, who the person usually is wonderfully nice. And I thought, what's going on here? And then it caught me. So I immediately, inside of myself, started doing the prayer that should be done to release this entity.
Well, I had also told
but
you to pray.
But the point is, I didn't quite know what was going on. I guess I must have looked like I was in Nana land.
When you were young, there was a guy who said you could have fun in a phone
Oh,
booth.
yeah. Yeah, he said, doggone it, you could have fun in a phone booth.
Well, you had fun
I
in an
know.
exorcism.
I
so-
know. Came true.
Mom,
You gotta find the humor in life.
you really do. We always seem to find it. We do have
We
really
do.
good senses of humor, I do have
Yes.
to say.
And that's gotten through us a lot.
Oh,
A lot of
absolutely.
dark times.
Whew, okay. The looks we're giving each other right now are hilarious. Anything that you would like to say to all the lovely beings out there?
Well, thank you, dear, for all the wonderful thoughts. And I know that the good things that you're putting out are reaching a lot of people. So, on this wonderful Mother's Day, I think Mother Teresa and I are going to go take a seat in the gallery.
Oh my god. Oh my god, Mom, you're an amazing, brilliant being. You know that? Yeah? You know
Yeah.
it? Okay.
I'm shaking my head, yes. No.
Well, for all of you lovely beings out there, I hope you enjoyed a little bit of time with me and my ma.
It was our pleasure.
I put her to work on Mother's Day for all of you.
Exactly.
Sending love and humor and laughter out there to everyone for this day and beyond.
Bye bye.
Bye.